We are really lucky to be joined by such esteemed colleagues today for this Developing Business Cases webinar. So we'll be hearing from Joseph Lowe, editor of the Green Book, who's joining us from HM Treasury today. We've got Bec Riley, Associate Professor for Enterprise Engagement and Impact at City-REDI, University of Birmingham. We'll also be hearing from Alice Pugh, Policy and Data Analyst, also from City-REDI, University of Birmingham. And I'm Gemma Adams. I'm a Project Manager within the National Civic Impact Accelerator programme. I sit within the NCCPE, National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement, and I'll be chairing our session today. Okay, can we move on slide-wise, please? Brilliant, thank you. So I just mentioned the National Civic Impact Accelerator. We'll be referring to it as the NCIA for today. Many of you in the room, I think, are part of that programme, are part of the action learning space. The NCIA, it's a 3-year, very quick turnaround project, essentially, to gather evidence and intelligence of what works, share civic innovations, and provide universities with frameworks and tools to develop and deliver meaningful and measurable civic strategies and activities. So we're really focused on building collaboration and policy and practice innovation. And we're doing that through different work streams. So building that living civic evidence base, a dynamic learning and innovation programme, which is the action learning process, which I know many of you on the call are part of, and a sector engagement programme of support, tools, training and communication. And this webinar is very much a part of that sector engagement programme of support that's been brought together through many partners within the NCIA programme. So can we move on a slide, please? Thank you. So we're really here to undertake a webinar regarding developing business cases, and the idea for this really came about through the action learning process and other conversations that we've had with institutions and organisations really undertaking civic engagement. And there's a real need for clear and evidenced arguments for resourcing civic activities, and that's where the idea of today's webinar came from. So in terms of an agenda today, we're already running a bit over, so I'll try and quicken up. So we'll be hearing from Joseph as our keynote for today. Then we'll be hearing from Bec Riley about business cases for higher education institutions. We'll be breaking out into small group discussions, and we really want to get a sense of your context and your experience with regards to building business cases. We will take a break at 5 to 11, and we'll give you 10 minutes to stretch your legs, grab a cup of tea. And then when we return, we will hear from Alice regarding developing a strategic case for civic. We'll once again break into small group discussions, and then we'll round off the day, pulling back everyone's thoughts, any challenges, any things that have been learned to sum up, and then we will finish at 12 o'clock. Okay, so we've got a very quick icebreaker that we wanted to do to just land people in the space. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Zoe Williamson very quickly to undertake a very quick icebreaker activity.
Hi everyone, so we've got a little bit of a Mentimeter to get us started. So just a couple of quick questions. The link is in the chat, so you can either click the link in the chat or you can go to menti.com and type in the code 65939484. And then the first question we've got today is what do you want to get out of the session? So just to quickly land us in the room, see what sorts of things people are looking to get out of today, and to make sure that we can make that happen as we move through the presentations and the breakout spaces. Can everyone see the Mentimeter okay? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yep, you can see the Mentimeter, Zoe.
Lovely.
And the code at the top of the Menti there is 65939484.
Lovely. So we've already got a couple of responses coming in. So lots of ideas about templates or structures, how to tailor business cases. making it a convincing business case. Excellent. So we'll continue to have a look at those in the background. And just another little question, just to see what we're thinking about civic universities and to see how that plays out in our organisations. A couple of ratings. So do you identify, or does your organisation identify as a civic university? Are they embedded? Are civic activities embedded in your organisation? And has it been developed alongside partners? Super interesting. So lots of civic universities in the room by the looks of it. And it's great to see that those approaches are being developed alongside civic partners as well. Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll continue to look at those as a team. I'm just going to hand over to Joseph.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's good to be here at last. I have been trying to be here for about 15 minutes, but we don't, for security reasons, we're not allowed to download apps, and we're all on Microsoft in most of government, so we don't have Zoom apps. And occasionally when we try and use the Zoom through Chrome, it gets a bit awkward, and this morning it was very awkward indeed, which is actually a very good introductory point, because what it shows is, even with the best laid plans, with technology that generally works, it doesn't always, and there's always something to go wrong. So one of the most important things in any business case is to take into account both uncertainty, which I hope some of my colleagues at least will know is unknown risk and unmeasured risk, and risk itself, and building contingency plans and all sorts of other things that you need, because if it can go wrong at some point, it may well go wrong. So at least it made a point. So could you put my first slide up, please? Okay. Look, the point of this slide is simply to say there are in the public domain online 3 documents that are immensely helpful. The one on the left is the Green Book. I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I'm the editor of the thing. But the point is, it's been developed, that Green Book, since the early 1970s, when it was originally guidance for the nationalised industries on how to put together investment proposals. It has evolved over the years and widened and deepened, and it is the result of the work of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of public servants working together, learning, making mistakes, putting it right. So it's a document that's evolved. And I've been the editor since January 2006, but it's really rather like being a curator of a museum or the director of a concert venue, because you have to understand the music that you're putting on or the exhibits that you're putting on, but you'll also have specialists in various areas of it, and you have to have a vision for the whole thing, and all those people contribute and build it up. You end up being a bit of an editor and a bit of a writer. But what I'm trying to say is this book isn't just landed from Mars. Similarly, the 2 things to the right of it are guidance on how to produce a project business case and guidance on how to produce a program business case. And they too have evolved since really the very early 1990s, and the creation of the model that we use, the 5 case model, by a guy, Dr. Joe Flanagan. He wasn't a doctor when he wrote it. I think he was an MA, but he was someone who developed it over the years, again, working with lots of people, learning from experience. They're tremendously helpful. They're written in plain English. Chapters 1 to 5 of the Green Book are probably all that most people will need. Maybe chapters actually 2 to 4, but as an overview. But certainly if doing a program or a project, those others are written in plain English. They're very followable, and they've got useful appendices in the back. So try to use them. I've put some contact details on there. So if anyone's got questions about stuff afterwards, I or the team I work with will be very, very pleased to assist or point you in the right direction of training or help or to advise you if we can, if we've got the time. So that's that. Could you put my next slide on, please? By the way, the thing at the top on that last slide where it said Green Book link is an active link. All those things are active links, which if you get a copy of the slides, when they're in slide view, they should operate. That's how the software generally works. That actually is really a shot from the first stage of the website. If you just type in Treasury Green Book Appraisal, you will get this. Type that into Google, you will find it, and you scroll down the screen and you'll see those 3 documents and loads of other things besides. I have to say the website is not very well structured. It's being restructured at the moment, and I hope the result will be better. It's not something that's entirely in our hands because it's run by a much larger outfit further away from reality called gov.uk, who look after the IT. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I want to talk to you about what business cases are about, because we haven't got long. This is just a short keynote. They are about thinking. They're not about writing. If you don't know what's going to be in a business case, you don't know what to write. And one person on their own is not going to know what, in fact, the process gives you, because it's not just a structure, it's a process, is a structured way of bringing in the expertise that you will need to develop your business case. And I say develop because you begin knowing a little. At the end, you don't know everything, but you know a lot. And this is how you proceed. And it's an iterative process, because obviously sometimes you learn along the way and you then have to skip back. So what it provides is a structure and a process. And to do a project, there are 35 key steps, and they're divided up into 10 main actions. There's a few steps in each action, and it takes you step by step what you should do and how to do it, and provides guidance on what it looks like. And it's a thinking process. Okay, the next, what else is it about? It's about objectives. Business cases are created to deliver an objective that the organization or the people running that organization wish to achieve. It's not about delivering benefits. Now, a lot of people think it's there to deliver benefits. Nothing wrong with benefits. I'm not knocking them. We all want lots of benefits. But the reason that we do a business case, that we put it together and construct it, is to deliver the objectives that it sets out to do. On the way, why do we care about benefits? The answer is we are looking for the best way to do it. Now, different ways of doing something will cause different costs and different cost profiles. Well, to offset against those costs, they will also deliver different levels of benefit. If any of them don't deliver the objective, we don't follow them up anyway. So let's assume all the options that we consider will deliver the benefit, because if they don't, we wouldn't be considering them. Then we need to know about costs and benefits in order to look at cost effectiveness or cost benefit analysis, depending on which we're able to do on the day with the data at hand. And that's why we need to know about benefits. But we don't need to rake around throwing every benefit we can imagine, including the kitchen sink, into a business case. They're there to help us judge between different options. So what else are business cases about? They're about viable alternatives. If you are ever looking at other people's business cases and they're putting forward alternatives that are not viable merely so they can destroy them, you really don't want to know, because that usually means they're retrofitting the business case to meet a preconceived plan. Because what they're not about, if you could just click the slide for me, is retrofitting. People often come for a business case with a ready-made solution in their head. That is not the way to proceed unless you want to end up with a disaster. What you should start out with is the perceived problem and, if you like, the picture of the world as it's going to be if we do not intervene. And it's not a static picture, it's a video, a projection of how the world is and how it will move forward. And it has to be supported by objective evidence. And then we want to see, in fact, what the viable alternatives are to meet the objective, which is a picture of the world as we want it to be as a result of the business case. This gets us away from looking at the solution into looking at the issue or the problem. I prefer to think of it as the change that's required, and in particular, the changes we have to make. In the terminology, we call them the business needs. Also, what else are business cases about? They're about collaboration. Because I said at the beginning, one person cannot develop a business case. You need to know about the strategic reasons for it. You need to know about the analysis of objective alternatives. You need to know about the commercial realities. If you've got to buy things, that will inform the funding levels. And of course, you need to know about the practical deliverability. So unless you've got experts in all those areas, and unless you've got subject matter experts concerning what the objective of the business case is, you're not going to get a good result. So it's not about siloed working, having people working away in separate packets, not talking to each other. It's about bringing people together and considering in a structured way, using the guidance to do it. So what else are business cases about? They're about social value, not market value. We can construct business cases for market value. They do it on Dragon's Den all the time. They do it very badly. They do it with a preconceived solution. And of course, many of them are rejected. So what else are business cases about? They're about delivering objectives, not pitching for pounds as they do on Dragon's Den. It's already been decided when you embark on a business case. Other studies have been done. Somebody in central government, it's ministers. In local government, it might be local councillors and the council. In universities, whatever the governing body is, whoever is commissioning the business case knows that they want to do something. Usually the problem is that they have a preconceived idea of the solution. It may be, oh, we're going to build one of these. Fine, that's your starting point. But never do you go home in the evening in the winter and think, oh, wouldn't it be really nice to consume some gas or electricity? Or I think I'll get the oil down. You don't. You think, I want to warm the place where I live, where I work, where I function, where my other people that I live with are. You consume the oil, the gas, whatever, in accordance with your need. So when people have a specific thing in mind, it's always to meet a need. And what we do is we don't ignore their requirements for a thing, but we say, what is the need they're trying to meet? And we analyze the world and work out the business case to meet the need, not to meet the retrofitted solution. If you want to see examples of a retrofitted solution, I suggest you look at the work of the National Audit Office, who routinely scrutinize what government do and the ones that go wrong. And there are plenty of examples, I'm sorry to tell you. So that's what I've got to say.
Thank you so much for that, Joseph. And it was just a really clear, I know we didn't give you much time, but a really clear framework that I think helps anybody understand how to develop or the framework in terms of developing a business case. And I know that you'll be facilitating one of our breakout spaces later. So some participants will be lucky to hear from you even further today. So thank you for that. I'll now be handing over to Bec Riley, who is going to be taking us through developing business cases for higher education institutions. Over to you, Bec.
Thanks, Gemma. A little bit of background. We're part of the NCIA program as City-REDI, and we're actually sort of developing the economic impact strand of the work, looking at the impact of universities on wider civic and place activities. I am also chair of the Green Book user group nationally. So work with Joseph on helping people to understand and utilise the Green Book. Have the next slide. So why should universities be interested in business cases? I think it's a relatively, the word business case is used in a lot of contexts, and sort of the process of business cases is actually often, as Joseph alluded to, looking at getting funding to actually fund something that a particular department or organisation wants to put in place. So there is a concept of business cases within universities, but we're talking about a particular approach which is endorsed by national government and Treasury. So every pound that is spent through from public purse should really follow this guidance. Why do universities need to develop business cases? I think the important thing is to pick up on some of the things that that Joseph was mentioning. And I think a really big area is actually this idea of coming up with a collaborative response to a problem. So you can use the Green Book process as a toolkit to help you work with your local partners to address a particular problem, whether that is low unemployment, whether that's getting students into jobs locally, whether that's getting people into a university to understand and interact with research. These are all things that take a collaborative approach. It's very structured in terms of good practice. It's relatively easy to work through. I think the important thing though is that there is a shift in funding to universities which has a greater emphasis on civic impact. This is partly on the back of the Civic University agreement sort of process, but it's also a big surge within UKRI and national government about the place impact of universities and how they can help local communities, businesses, and policy structures, which is coming through an awful lot of calls at the moment. And there is also the excellence framework and how actually a lot of this civic-based work can lead to impact, which gives good impact case studies and demonstrates, the real change that universities can make. And the business case helps you get to that position. When to develop a business case, as Joseph said, really you should be starting right at the beginning. As soon as you've identified a problem, you need to be thinking in terms of what's the business case to address this problem. It's really good at getting buy-in and linking to strategic aims of organisations and creating those shared challenges across multiple partners. You can identify the challenge, identify is that vision of the future, what you want it to look like, and work backwards to what are the ways that you could solve that problem. There are always different ways to tackle a challenge. This approach and this methodology can help you decide on what the best solution is. There's often an awful lot of focus on the economic case. But actually the reality is it's the whole thing put together that's important. And depending on what objective you're trying to aim to, the economic case is a greater or lesser importance. And what really the economic case helps you do is understand which is the best solution to a particular problem. I think the way that we could use this toolkit and guidance is actually to show that a civic project isn't just a good thing to do. Quite often it comes from a place of, this is the right thing to do, this is a good thing to do. But actually, this process can help you show that it's the best thing to do. And next slide, please. I think linking the guidance to a civic project, I think it's also important to put it in its wider context. So if we're thinking about what is the challenge, what are we trying to do? So what's the political, economic, social, technological, environmental and legal issues that are affecting the university or the place or the particular scientific area, etc.? what are those things? What's the problem you're trying to solve? That starts out to drive and shape your ideas. What are the policy strategies, initiatives and targets that you might want to understand and address, which helps you to define that scope and to prioritize the objectives that you would want to put in your business case. And it's only at that sort of point where you start to think about what are the programs, how am I going to monitor it and set it up. So you've done an awful lot of work, and you will have done it with your partners. One of the big mistakes people make is they don't document it. They don't document that thinking bit at the first stage. So quite often, a whole process has been undergone with your partners to get to a particular project. And because you've not documented it, it's for them very difficult to remember what the different options that you discussed are. So it's important to do that. And then you can start to look at how you implement and deliver a program and what actually needs to be achieved to bring about that and address that challenge. Next slide, please. So thinking about it in its wider terms, linking in with civic engagement projects, it's a toolkit that allows you to case make for civic working. It's always good to look at what's happened, what's been done elsewhere, and examples of good practice, and that's what we're trying to gather together at the NCIA, and also research activities that affect a place, a community, or multiple communities, but most importantly has a real world impact. So you're looking at what that impact is, what that change you want to make to result in a new reality or a new future, as Joseph described. Being able to picture what the change will be when you do this project is vital for doing a very good business case. So what's different in higher education than say a local government or national government? I think there is something around within universities, there are different approaches to business cases, and the quality can be varied, and the processes internally can be varied. What happens though with the Green Book is generally, if you're going to have any public money, external public money attached to it, you will be following a Green Book process, but you might not recognise it. And that's the danger, actually. You know, the forms that you get to fill in to put a project together, you might not immediately recognise them as Green Book, but actually they are. Although funding structures and calls have different expectations, some of those decision-making and processes and practices will also follow the Green Book. And there is a more and more shift in UKRI to align itself with the rest of the government to be doing this. So when you're talking about things like the case for investment or the resources that you're going to have, these are all very similar to the 5 case model. So it's actually useful to understand that, so you can apply some of these techniques to strengthen what you're putting in on a standard business case, standard funding application. Next slide, please. So Joseph mentioned the 5 case model. Today we're going to focus a bit more on the strategic, but actually, if you and presentations I've seen Joseph do before, the idea is that this is sort of a 5-sided pyramid. All of these cases stack up against one another, and if one is weak, the whole building falls over. And what we found in the Green Book review a couple of years ago is that actually one of the issues is the strategic case is often fairly weak, and that sets you all off on the wrong direction. So it is important to get that right first, and then that filters into the other cases. So what is the case for change? What is it you're trying to develop and deliver? What's the change? What's the impact you're trying to create? What's the new world and environment that you want to put in place? And how does that project that you're thinking about or program, how does it fit with the wider aims and goals of the institution or the funder? That's where you should start from. Economic case helps you understand what's the best solution that optimizes that public spend and creates the best social value relative to how much you're going to spend. people get obsessed with some of the technicalities of the benefit cost ratio, but actually it all depends on what your strategic objectives that you're trying to achieve. Commercial is about how you deliver the solution on a commercially acceptable term, so procurement, etc. A lot of these might be covered within your organisations, especially in universities that have structured approaches to this. But getting that buy-in from your procurement team is quite good to have early on. So you can explore innovative ways of doing that. Financial, is it affordable to the organisation? Can they invest? Can the university invest? Is there funding that we can look at? And management is about how it will be delivered. So what are the program management processes? Have you got project managers? Have you got your risk assessment? All these things come under the management case, as well as how you will evaluate whether you've actually reached that goal. Next slide, please. So why are business cases important? As Joseph said, projects will only deliver their intended outputs and benefits if they're actually properly scoped, planned, and justified right from the outset. You won't get to where you're trying to get to unless that project has all the right pathways to get you there. And this is what Green Book's about, is helping you think through that and decide that it is guidance, not a checklist in that sense. It improves decision making. Importantly, I think for civic projects, it improves decision making across a group of people so that you can come together and have shared objectives across multiple partners. It's a good way of documenting and agreeing those things. And it also, by default, then it provides accountability and assurance the project will meet all those areas of good public spending, such as a strategic fit, value for money, etc. Requirement actually for all public, centrally funded public spending proposals. This, as I said, is regarded as best practice. So the more we can introduce that into structures like universities, the more likely we are to have successful outcomes. Thank you. I'm going to hand it back to Gemma.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Bec, and taking us through why business cases are important, and just taking us so quickly through what is such a big topic. We are moving a little bit late on time, so we are going to move into small group discussions. Okay, I'll get going because I think people are slowly making their way into the room, and I want to ensure that I can get you to a break in good time. So I hope you found that time useful. I'm aware it wasn't a lot of time considering how many of you there are. So I do want to make you aware that in the next half of this event, you will be going back into the same breakout rooms to undertake a task. So you'll have a bit more time together as a group. I just wanted to check if everyone is back from the breakout rooms. I think we've got a couple left to go. But while we're waiting, I wanted to see if anybody wanted to volunteer what they were discussing in the breakout rooms. You can put your hands up, virtual hands up, and I'll come to you. Otherwise, if there's any facilitators from any of the rooms that would be happy to just give a brief headline of what you discussed. And if I can't see any hands, I might pick on Zoe from one of the groups, if that's okay, Zoe.
That's fine. Yeah, Bec's got a hand up as well, so Bec can go after me. But we talked a bit about the complexity in all of this. So you've got different scenarios in devolved nations. So the civic mission in Wales is much more kind of an open door that you can walk through. It's easier to collaborate. But then in England, there's different levels of complexity in terms of London and the mayoral authority, and then you've got devolved nations. So we talked a little bit about that. And we also talked about how we can encourage universities to work together, either across universities, but also across colleges, and kind of break down some of those barriers. So yeah, lots of good conversation there. Bec?
I suppose what was interesting, this is probably one for me to pick up with Joseph afterwards, actually, is that the calls that come from the UKRI and the funders generally don't allow you to apply this methodology. So you don't have options quite often, and you don't have flexibility or innovation in how you might do it. So, and they're very linear. As if, you know, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, which loses some of the flexibility that you can have with the Green Book approach. I think, but generally people said it's good to do despite those constraints, because it does enable you to collaborate with your partners and come up with shared challenges that you want to address. You might not be the person to address it, but it does allow that to happen.
Brilliant. Thanks for that insight, Bec, from that group. Were there any other burning questions, comments from any of the breakout groups that anybody wanted to bring into the room before we go on a break? Okay, I can't see anything. So what I will do is send us off for a break. Welcome back, everyone. I'm hoping people have made their way back to their desks, and having 10 minutes has allowed you to make a cup of tea, or it's still morning, cup of coffee, and take a bit of a screen break. Okay, so we are now going to move on to a presentation from Alice Pugh on developing a strategic case for Civic. So Alice, am I okay to hand over to you to speak to your slides, please?
Yes, if I can press the unmute button. So I'll just do a quick introduction for me. So I'm Alice Pugh. I'm a policy and data analyst at City-REDI, and I am working with Hannes and Bec on impact and the impact of universities. I am also Green Book practitioner trained, so I promise I do have the qualification. Next slide, please. So part of the reason why I chose to look at the strategic case rather than one of the others is, as Bec said before, in reviews by the Treasury, the strategic case has largely been the section that can let people down a bit. It's also the bit that is in most project plans or bids. You'll always have to do the strategic case. You might not recognise it as the strategic case, but you'd always have to do it. So the purpose of the strategic case is to make the case for change and demonstrate how the chosen project is going to provide strategic fit. There's three main elements to the strategic case, and that is the rationale, and this is what's the case for change? Why do you want to change the business as usual? And then how will the potential intervention affect change? The business need is what changes will the organisation have to implement to bridge the identified gap from the business as usual to achieve the outputs and outcomes that you've identified. And then the strategic fit is how the project fits in with the wider policy, how it fits in with current ongoing work, maybe from yourselves or partners or stakeholders, and how the intervention might impact those other bodies. Next, please. So when you're doing a strategic case, it requires you to answer the following questions. What is the current situation or the business as usual? What's wrong and why does it need resolving? This is largely about identifying where you are, where you want to be, and then how we're going to get there. In these questions, the SMART objectives are, as Joseph said, one of the most important aspects for a business case, because once you identify your SMART objectives in the strategic case, it'll be what the rest of your business case is based around. And by SMART objectives, we mean specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time related. And these are usually your outputs and outcomes on a project. Then you have to ask yourself what changes need to be made to attain the SMART objectives. So what's your business need? What do you actually have to do to enact that change? And then again, the wide holistic fit. So how's it fitting with the current policy scape? How's it fitting with partners? How's it fit on with your ongoing work? And then the logical change process. So this takes all these questions and puts them into a step-by-step process that you can follow, which shows you how you get from the business as usual to achieving the outputs and outcomes. Some people might call it theory of change or logic model, but I've gone with the green book, which is the logical change process. Next, please. So this is the logical change process in a bit more of a structured way. So you've got to ask yourself in the rationale, what's the business as usual case that needs to be addressed, and what's its strategic fit? What are the resources for inputs? It's what are the resources and assets that will be needed? So what staffing are you going to need? All these sorts of questions. Activities, what activities will you do to achieve your outputs? And then what outputs are you trying to achieve? And the biggest thing is you have to be smart. We tend to get lots of strategic cases come to us where they're not smart, so you can't measure them. And if you can't measure them, when you come to do the evaluation, you then can't say whether you've had impacts. That's quite an important aspect of the logical change process. And then outcomes. So what is the change you were trying to influence that you don't necessarily have direct control over? So for instance, that might be reducing unemployment in your local area. Next slide, please. So the first step in the logical change process is the rationale. And the questions that you'll ask yourself are, what is the business as usual? What evidence is there to demonstrate a need for change? And what is the strategic fit of the project? And evidence is very important in a strategic case. You have to be able to demonstrate that there is actually a need for change. So, for instance, that might be if you're doing a project, you might have done a pilot before you've done it, and all this builds the evidence to demonstrate that there is a need for change. And your strategic fit, you might be strategies, policies, civic agreements, primary research, past evaluations. Next, please. Imports. Again, what resources we need, and when you're trying to demonstrate the resources you need, again, it'll be past interventions, it might be consultations, it might be inputs from partners, inputs from suppliers, and all this needs to be demonstrated within your strategic case. Activities is the next step, and this is what you might actually need to do. So this usually comes from either past intervention. What you might need to do usually comes from you workshopping with partners on what steps you'll actually need to take. How will you do the project itself? How will you get students to, will you sign up? Will you get students to sign up? How will you get partners to sign up? How will you get in contact with local authorities to get them to engage in the project? These are usually the activities that you consider, particularly in civic engagement. And then outputs. Outputs, as I said, are probably the most important part of this section, because it's how you're going to measure whether your intervention was successful from the business as usual. And it will be what you base your option appraisal on. So when you're appraising your different options for potential interventions in your economic case, this is what you'll be basing those options around. So how successful will this option be against the output, the smart outputs that I've set out? Next, please. And then outcomes. Outcomes tend to be the wider impacts that you're trying to influence. So if you're doing a project which, as I said before, sets up students in local businesses in the area to close skills gaps, one of your wider impacts might be that you've reduced graduate unemployment. And I tend to think of outcomes as something that you can influence, but you don't have direct control of, whereas outputs, you have direct control over whether they've been achieved. Next, please. So I think this is it's all seeming a little bit distant at the minute. So I'll put in some examples of different funding opportunities that have come out which have had high levels of civic engagement recently. So with levelling up becoming one of the government's main policies, there's been a much greater increase in funding which centres around civic engagement. So we've got a few of those funds here. We've got Strength in Places, you've got the LPIP, you've got Prosperity Partnerships, and all these projects, around a third of them depend on civic engagement. So it depends on the project being set up with civic partners, so whether that's local authorities, public bodies, community groups, charities, local enterprise partnerships, combined authorities, all need to be engaged on the project, on these funds and the project that you're bidding with. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a project that I've worked on in the past before. So the National Centre for Decarbonisation of Heat was a project which the University of Birmingham led on, and it was for the Levelling Up Fund, so it had to be done with partners, both academic, private and public. And the project was to build a centre that would enable for research and development into efficiency products for houses. So insulation, modern heating systems such as solar panels or electricity systems, so solar panels, heat pumps, smart technology in the household. It also offered training for people in the local authority, so training people to be able to retrofit homes. It offered opportunity for product demonstration, because this project worked nicely with a previous project that I'd helped the university bid for, which was called TICE, which near this site there is a incubation hub for businesses coming out of the university, or students with businesses coming out of the university to test their products, and now they can use this facility as well to also test the products. The long-term goal was, once the centre had successfully helped to train up a number of people, was to start retrofitting homes. And there is a project to retrofit 300 homes in East Birmingham, which is one of the most fuel poor, I think it's the 6th most fuel poor local authority or in the UK. And the other work stream on this was to have community engagement. So with retrofitting these homes, which were largely going to be council homes, there had to be an element of community engagement to ensure that the community was on board with the project and they understood how to use the technology which would be going into their own homes. And this project involved a lot of work between the council. So we had lots of support from Birmingham City Council. We had lots of support from Greater Birmingham, Solihull, LEP. And then we had lots of input from other academic areas such as the Catapult and the Manufacturing Technology Centre. We also had the Tyseley Energy Park, which is the main private partner, which is leading on this. And then we had other partners from the private sector, such as the Green Finance Institute, we have Worcester, we have Bosch. And the project largely was about setting up that, well, was building the centre itself and about setting up that initial civic agreement between all those public and private and academic partners, which took a lot of engagement to get people on board. Luckily, the team lead on this from the University of Birmingham had a lot of experience with setting up these partnerships. But the project involved largely, we had to do lots of workshops, and luckily we were part of the project from the very start as the economics team. And I think that's probably why it was successful in the Levelling Up Fund, was because we were engaged from the start of the project right through to the end. But this is probably the largest project involving civic engagement that I've worked on, and it did involve quite a lot of work. So for instance, we had to set up a program for how the community engagement would be run, and that was done with, we had a few charities and a few housing associations get involved in that as well. And yeah, generally it's the biggest project I've worked on with civic engagement, and it has gone quite well. It's one of the few projects that is actually going to be starting construction first soon, given the other levelling up projects haven't been quite so successful yet. Next slide, please. So I'll just introduce the breakout session. So as I said, one of the most important parts of doing your strategic case is building your logical change process. And to do this, usually, well, what we certainly did on the National Centre for Decarbonisation was we did lots of workshops to build this out. So in this breakout session, I'm going to ask you in your groups to try and build your logical change process around the projects that has high levels of civic engagement. So what do you think you will need in each step of this process to build a strong case that has a large civic engagement element to the project? And I will pass over to Gemma to keep us on track with the timings. I'm not sure how long we've got.
Great, thanks, Alice. We will have around 15 minutes again for this. And thank you, Alice, for that. It's really helpful to have a real life example of how you build a logic model for a strategic case for civic. So we'll be sending you off back into your breakout rooms, the same breakout rooms, and we'll meet you back here in 15 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that gave you a good amount of time to really start to dig into how to build a strategic case for a project within your institution or organisation. We've got a little bit of time for feedback. And what I might ask Shireen in the background, actually, if you can come off slide share so I can maybe see everyone here. Thank you so much. And if anybody had any questions or any feedback from that last discussion, we've got about 5 to 10 minutes to have a bit of a discussion in the space, or please use the chat if there's anything that you'd like to bring forward. And if not, I'll come to some of our facilitators otherwise to talk through it. So, Bec, I can see you nodding your head there. Are you happy to talk to what your group was discussing, please?
Well, the first person to volunteer we had a project. It's quite interesting because we've had something similar in Birmingham, and it was around sort of the nature of EDI within the university and its wider stakeholders. So they've come together as sort of an anchor institutions network and been looking at EDI as a shared objective. Something about people sort of having this role, remit, rationale, or goal, but actually it's not owned by anybody and it's not driven forward. So taking a business case approach was quite interesting, in that what's the evidence to demonstrate that there's a problem, and what actually is that problem, and is it a problem for a university, came through in the discussion. So if a university is an international organization, but then by default their employees should reflect that. However, that goes hand in hand with if you're in a particular area that is highly diverse, you would expect some of that to come through as well. So it's balancing those two things off, but having a clear understanding of that. And then, of course, there was something around, we understood what the business as usual was, because these anchor institutions wanted to reflect their local population, and it wasn't working because it didn't. Therefore, what can be done to help that to happen? And that's what this was all about. And I think it was less about new activity, but actually how do we change the business as usual? So it's less about new funds, new new people doing things. It was more about what do we do currently and how we can change it. So so what needs to change in that sense, in terms of making sure recruitment is inclusive, making sure the approaches and who you attract and jobs are open to people. But I think that it was quite an interesting, more fundamental issue about the role of universities in that, and how representative their workforce should be in that context. And that's a challenge, I suppose, for Rebecca to go back with, in terms of, how do we articulate that in our rationale for change, why we're doing it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bec, for that. I'm not sure, Zoe or Alice, if there was resonance with that. How do we work with the business as usual rather than new activity, or if there were different comments coming from your group? Zoe, can I hand to you first? I'm not sure if people are unable to put their hands up or get their videos on, so apologies for that. We are working on that in the background. Joseph, you actually have your hand up, so do you want to come in first before we move on?
Yeah, two things came up in our meeting. The other things came up as well, but they both concern difficulties, which is that the promoters of an idea are very keen to get on with talking about their idea and very reluctant to go through a process, a logical change process. So getting them to focus can be challenging. That was the first difficulty. And then the second one that was put forward was that it's actually quite difficult at times to devise objectives which are measurable or verifiable. And because there can be so many other things that affect a particular state of being in an area, if you're trying to make an impact on an area, and that the SMART objectives can therefore be quite tricky to identify. And both of these things came up. I mean, obviously in the time we hadn't got a lot of time to talk about that and tactics for dealing with it. But those are both challenges that anyone has to face when they're setting out on this, getting people to slow down, not jump into the end product, and also identifying the change that you want to make. My feeling about projects is really you should be defining the output of the project, the thing that the project will deliver, and making a case for why that is a good thing and how that will contribute to some kind of wider change. But usually projects really are better off being part of a program, because it's programs that tend to deliver change. Programs are big things which consist of lots of interrelated projects, and they usually deliver some change in public service, which then is clearly measurable and can be beneficial.
Thanks so much for describing that for us, Joseph. And Yeah, I think that that difficulty of really nailing down, what the outcomes can be when we're thrust into working so quickly and rapidly, is a common issue. So thank you for that. Zoe, are you happy for me to come to you?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about finding where the strategies of different partnerships align, and using that as maybe a focus for ways of working together and aligning those outcomes, and maybe acknowledging that it doesn't matter what you do to get there as long as we have aligned those outcomes together, which I thought was quite a good way of thinking about it as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Zoe, for that input. And Alice, your camera's on. So can I ask you to speak to what your group were discussing, please?
So we actually discussed outputs and outcomes, and we discussed a lot of projects that would tend to win funding, whether it be universities or government funding, tend to be large capital build projects. So big shiny projects where someone can say, "Oh, look what I've done," but they focus less on the longer term outputs or outcomes of actually influencing change. And one of the questions to whether we think in the upcoming future whether the emphasis might change from it being short-term, large-scale projects to more long-term projects that actually influence change.
Interesting. Thanks so much, Alice. There's some wide-ranging conversations that are happening in these different groups, and I think with 10 minutes to go, it probably leads us quite nicely on to thinking about what the next steps can be. We've had 2 hours here today, and frankly, not enough time to delve into what is a really, meaty and needed topic. And Bec, am I okay to hand to you quickly to just discuss what next steps possibly could be from this webinar, where we might want to go with it from a NCIA perspective?
Yeah, I suppose from us this was an introduction to business cases, but it's great to have such a variety of experience actually and knowledge in the breakout groups and the topics that came up. I think when we've done the training internally within our team around better business case, one thing that comes up quite a lot is how do you then explore individual cases? How do you apply what you learn? So, and I think there was quite a lot of that in the discussion we had in the second one. So I think what I would like to do potentially is to start looking at the other parts of the business case and take it and probably around the other bits. And it's whether people would be interested in that. And maybe, and this is something I'm not really discussed, but maybe getting people together for a day and going through these things and sharing some of these ideas. One of the things that we might be looking at, certainly in the LPIP program, is looking at some sort of some approaches to theory of change for different areas, for instance, that people could look at. And I know that the Green Book, the place chapter within the Green Book is being developed and updated, so there will be vignettes and case studies in there. It might actually be good to be gathering some of them as a network for NCIA, so that we have some vignettes of how people have tackled applying the business case approach. That might be something that we could do over the next couple of years, Gemma, in terms of developing some of that and bringing those case studies together.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bec, for that. Yeah, this is very much the start of, what could be a much wider ranging long-term resource, essentially. So we really thank you for being here today with us. We still have time. If there are any questions, do pop them in the chat or pop your hand up. But in the meantime, we do have a Padlet, which I'm hoping someone will be able to pop into the chat, which allows you to give feedback really on where we should go next with this topic. In the Padlet, I think when it comes into the chat, we're looking at where next. There's a resource in there about making the business case for sustainability that we thought was quite a good model for a potential resource. We'd like to know what went well about the webinar and what we could improve. But I think we are thinking that we'd like to run more of these as a series. But also, like Bec said, there's the potential that maybe we can bring people together in person and really take a bit of a deep dive into those different contexts and different considerations that you each have when building a business case for your civic activities. Okay, I can't see any hands up, so I'll leave you with that business case Padlet. Also, what we'll drop into the chat is if there are any bits of feedback that you can't access the Padlet on, we'll put in the NCIA email address, and you can contact through that, and that can be shared out amongst all of the partners here today. We've just put up the slide now about Civicon, which is upcoming 18th and 19th of June. So that's being led by Sheffield Hallam University, who are the lead partner in the NCIA programme. I think tickets and ticketing will be coming out quite soon, so keep an eye on that. And there is also, I think, some information in the chat about how to sign up for our various newsletters. So you can just keep abreast of the different things that are upcoming through the project. Okay, I will have another quick check if there's no questions, and then if not, it's quite unheard of really, but we'll give you 4 minutes back. So definitely put things in the chat if you'd like to. We've given you lots of different ways to feed back to us, but we really thank you for spending 2 hours on a Friday morning with us looking at this topic, and hope to see you again soon at another one of our events. Thanks everyone for attending.